Kia ora koutou, whānau o te ao. Hillary and Rick asked me to start this with a bit of a mini and a karakia, which is like a greetings and a blessing of the hui. Try and set things in the right format. So I'll start, and when I finish, I'll probably translate what I said, because some of us may not understand the reo. But firstly, kia ora koutou, katoa, tui hui mai tēnei pō, mō tēnei hui taumaha ki a tātou katoa, which means greetings to you all this night for this meeting and this topic that we hear, kaupapa that we hear. So I'll do a karakia now. It's about a manu wairua. Ka Māori, it's a peaceful bird. Mai te aro, he rere ana, mai te awa wai māpihi ki te whanui a tāre. E rea te ki mātārangi ki te wahi a tātai me ngake. Haere tunu ki te moana o Raukawa, ki te tukurau, ki te maru o te maunga titohia o Taranaki, te wai tohu rau ko te whiti, ngā tangata o te raukura. Haere tunu ki te reina, ki te rerira ngā wairua, ki te moana nui a kiwa, ki te whae ao ki te ao nārama, ti hei manu. So what I've seen is this peaceful manu that flies down our awa, Waimapihi, out to our harbour, past Mount Vic, the place of Ngake and Waitaita, which is our Tūtaniwha, out to the Cook Strait, up past Taranaki, the place where Tohu and Te Whiti and the Raukura is the symbol of peace, and Te Aotearoa is the iwi of, one of the iwi of Wellington, which Taranaki maunga is their maunga, and then further north up to the Rerina Wairua, where our spirits fly after we pass away, past the Kermit Studio, out to the Pacific, and then into the world of understanding. And T.A. Mauri Order is the breath of life. So, kia ora koutou.
Thank you, Dan. Hi everyone, and very warm welcome this evening. I'm Luke. I'm one of the co-chairs of Avcc, along with Hillary. I think you're familiar with what we're going to do this evening in general, and what I'll do in a minute is hand over to Anne Cunningham. Now, Anne Cunningham is someone who's been helping us facilitating the community engagement process that we've been going through. And Anne will be our facilitator tonight, so we'll talk a bit about, a few of us will talk about the background of the project. The architects and the landscape architects will present their designs, as hopefully you've seen, and then there'll be a process where we talk about the designs, give feedback, because some decision making will occur following that. And that will be explained more in detail, but I just really want to say a warm welcome to you all.
So I'm going to start by doing a really, really boring. I have to admit, I didn't ask Lexi. If there's an emergency, what do we do, Lexi?
We can't go down in the park.
Right, okay. So we all go out to the park and continue out there, of course.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, that was a bit that I forgot to say. Yeah, the fire exits are marked, toilets are out that door if you need them, and in an earthquake, it's the usual drop, cover and hold.
Yeah. Do you want to demonstrate then? Okay. If you have a child, I think you've all already deposited them next door, but there is childcare next door, but do sign your children in and out of the preschool so that we know where they are. Hillary, we are filming tonight. There's one camera facing the stage to record the presentations, and there's one facing you, and that's really just to capture the sound. And the intention is to quite quickly get that up on YouTube or something so that other people who haven't been able to come tonight can get on top of what the discussion's been and have a look at how the designs have been received. So it's just as a kind of record and to extend the reach of what we're doing today. The design information is available, so I think we've probably got enough for one copy for everybody, but when we move into the design review stuff, we'll make sure that you've all got that. Claire at the back is helping us make sure that everybody's got what they need today. So that's Claire in the blue jumper. If you haven't got something, me or Claire, we can help you out with that, pens, plans, whatever you need. And the feedback sessions, there is pen and paper available to all of you. For those of you who, because we need to give you a lot of information up front, you might well want to note questions or note comments as you go. So do take an opportunity to do that, because we want to make sure that you get the best opportunity possible to think well about what you're going to say. So as Luke gave an overview, there's going to be a series of presentations, and that's really out of respect for you. You need to know what you're commenting on. We want to make sure that it's legitimate and it's informed. So Hilary and Luke will give you some background, and then Teresa from Wellington City Council, who's on that steering group, because this project is co-governed by Aro Valley Community Council and Wellington City Council. And then 20 minutes from the design team, both the built environment and the landscape will speak. And then we'll have around about 10 minutes, so that's really just to clarify your understandings of the designs. Designs are a professional mode of presentation. We want to make sure that you've got an idea of what you're seeing. The next part is about feedback, and we'll do 3 sessions. One of them is the really substantive, the big session, and I've got something that I developed actually when I was doing work around Scottish land reform, and it's also quite fun. So it's a way of really getting underneath things, getting to what you really feel about those designs. And then we'll do an exercise to just look at the degree of support for moving forward in the direction that designs are moving in. And then a short exercise at the moment just to identify people you trust to support the design development going forward. So I just wanted to say something about, why are you here? Why do we invite people here? And for me, there's 2 things. This is your place, and your place affects your identity. It also affects how you can function. It is important, and I just wanted to really acknowledge that a place is a partner in your life. It is a facet of what you can do to thrive. So we're here because this is your place, and you know your sense of place. We're also here for the sense of community. Something that I say at the beginning of every workshop, I'm not a big fan of sitting here with paper and getting you to set ground rules. I think as adults we all know how to behave with dignity and respect and kindness to each other. And just to acknowledge that by behaving like that, people are more likely to choose to participate in the future. The felt experience of when you come into a room and how you experience your community is a big part of what encourages you to come back. If you do, and I know that place change can be emotional, I don't know if it will be tonight, if you do feel like you need a break, the kitchen is available for cups of tea, soup and rolls. We've opened the space at the front here, or you're welcome to have a go and walk in the park. If you feel that by doing that you don't have a chance to feedback, just come have a chat with me at the end, and I'll make sure that what you need to say gets put in the next. Next slide. So over to the presentation. So I'm going to hand over to Luke and Hilary, and I'm going to keep you to time. So we want to make sure that everything runs before we all fall asleep tonight. Okay. You've got up to 10 minutes between you.
All right. Kia ora koutou, me nui kia koutou, nau mai haere mai ki nei Hilary. Ko waio, ko Hilary, ko ingoa. Just again welcome you all to this meeting tonight, and thank you for all turning up and saying who I am. I'm Hilary, originally from the South Island, but I've been in Wellington for the last 18 years, and at least 8 of those in this valley. I feel very privileged to be part of this community and to be the co-chair of the Community Council. Oh, I'm already over time. I just want to acknowledge a few people. I want to thank Teresa and Anne and our architects, landscape design Mark, and John and Dan coming on tonight and giving us their presentations and being part of this discussion. Thank Aro Fruit Supply and the Mini Mart and Aro Valley for providing the food. And then I want to go back further in time and kind of acknowledge the people and who came before us, who were part of the history of this place. When this valley was filled with trees and the bird song, and the Wangapiki stream used to run down through what is now Aro Street. Those people, I hope, enjoyed their environments and surroundings and took the opportunity to sit and talk and laugh and sing and debate various things just as we do in this place. And I like to hope that they are happy that some of their land was now and is now utilised and was gifted or handed over to the community eventually. I want to jump forward in time then to like the 1970s when the place here there used to be a school in what is now the Charo Park, and there was tennis courts here and a tennis pavilion in what we now call the bunker. The school eventually closed down, but the community decided that they wanted to keep this space, and so the council agreed to gift it over, or hand it over, I'm not sure exactly how it happened, and then put this building on as, they didn't have the funds to build a community centre, so they put this building on in the interim, and 42 years later, it's still here. The park, as we know, it wasn't then a park, it was an asphalt area, and people from this community decided they wanted a park and went along in the dead of night and dug up the asphalt and planted some trees. And I'm sure many of you, as I do, really appreciate that action that those people have took then, because, you know, now we have this beautiful patch of greenery in an otherwise quite dark, often place, and places where we don't all have our own kind of backyard or a place where we can sit on the grass, all those sorts of things. So it's just kind of recognising that over time things really change. I'm sure the people back, the tangata whenua, had no idea what this place would look like all that time down the track. We really don't have any idea what this place will look like kind of 100 years, 50 years, even 20 years potentially from now. But I guess my hope is that regardless of what kind of happens here, that those things that we still, with this building, the things that we still value as a community, that activism, that passion, that environmental sensibility, having a place where we can connect with each other, where we can laugh and sing and dance, where we can mourn, where we can debate, that this process gives us a place where all of those things can happen, that enables us to do all those things. I don't think that the building itself is the key thing. I'm sorry, architects. It is the people and what they bring to that place. So, yeah, that's my hope for this process, and we'll see what happens. So to you.
I'll just keep this brief because Hillary's given a fantastic introduction, and I don't want to cut into what the landscape architects and architects are going to talk about in their presentations and the backgrounds they give to how they got to where they got. But this really just a recap for anyone who's not familiar with how this process has run so far. So after Wellington City Council approached us, I think it was Iona in the first instance, about wanting to partner with the community on this project, you know, in order to determine how best to spend that money that was set aside, the public money that's set aside in the Wellington City Council budget. We initiated a series of workshops which and helped design the lead. And that's over the course of, it's been a bit more than a year now that we've been in earnest going through that process. And and most recently since the last workshop where various ideas were presented and tested for feedback, various components of designs. The design team has been synthesising all of that feedback and all of the results of all of that engagement into designs that respond to that, and that also that's netted in with all of the technical feasibilities of what's possible to actually solve that complex design problem, and to get surveys, structural engineers involved, and to get cost estimates of various options priced, and all of that is fed into what they will be presenting this evening, and they'll be able to explain the background to how they've got to where they've got to with the designs much better than I. But yeah. Over to you, but first, Teresa from Wellington City Council.
So I'm Teresa Janos. I am the advisor of city partnerships. Been working with the Aro Valley for at least 5 years as an advisor to the community and the community center staff and the council there. This project, I'll just start out by saying it's brought to you by the Wellington City Council and the people of Aro Valley, because that's really what it's about. It's about all those things that Ann and Hillary mentioned. Just talk briefly about the policy framework and just a quick introduction. There was a lot of work done around development of why these projects, this project in particular came through, and it started way back when, and as Hillary mentioned, a long time ago. But more recently, there's a centers policy that was developed where it talked about the idea of community hubs, so gathering community spaces and community facilities, parks, whatever, in kind of clusters. So a good example, the Johnsonville library that's going in now, and in here in Aro Valley we already have a community hub. So it's putting the investment in those places that are gathering community facilities together. We also did a lot of work around condition assessments of community centers throughout Wellington. We have over 20 community facilities that we evaluated during that phase, trying to figure out what condition they were in and what was needed long term. The council also adopted a facilities policy in 2010, and it did include quite a bit of research into what was where the growth was happening and where those facilities were needed, and also a lot of information about deprivation and what the community needed given areas of economic and community need as well. And it resulted ultimately in some funding that was put in the long-term plan for 3 projects in Wellington, included Aro Valley, Newtown, and Strathmore Park, which were the defined, of all the 20 or more that we have, these were the areas that the investment was going to happen. And then just a quick view about the partnership that Luke mentioned as well. We fund the community council here in Aro Valley to run the community center, and it's definitely very much a partnership in terms of the decision making that we're going through. It's very untraditional consultation as well, I think, so far that we've consultation in council tends to be a bit more formal, and this has been very much a different way of working through the scoping and design. In terms of the construction phase, as we move forward, that portion will be more council-led. But the initial phases have been very much run by the community council. And I think Ann mentioned sense of place. So just to let you know, this is a thing. The things about buzzwords like sustainability and resilience and all this. I'll just introduce you another one. It's called placemaking. So it is a very different way of working. It's inviting people that live in the place and enjoy the place and visit the place to be part of that decision making. So I'll let you Google it another time, but it's actually it's a lot about identity as well, which is mentioned quite a bit. The council and community council and the way we've been working this project, we're definitely learning a lot, and we're I think what I'll say I've learned is that those interactions have been critical for me to figure out how this project can move forward. The laughter and the thoughtfulness has been amazing, and the respect for this place. I think, and I just the idea about identity as well, that it's really key, and it's really come through for me in all the discussions that we've had. We've had so many. I've been here at every workshop, and just watching and listening and serving curry. So, but it's been a really great exploration. So that engagement also, though, is key to future work. The public playground that's across from us here, there is additional funding to be upgraded in the future. We've identified the Abel Smith Street garages as somewhere we can fund some additional work there. And there's lots of potential for community-led projects that have come out of all of the input that has come through, as well as ideas for social and community well-being that can be further implemented. So what I've learned is that we can definitely progress as you move forward in that's it for me. Thank you.
Just before we start the design presentations, is there anyone who wants to make notes that hasn't got a pen and paper? Is there anybody who wants to make notes who hasn't got a pen and paper to make notes with? Because we can quickly get you some. All good? Yeah?
Excellent. I'm going to stand over here so the camera can't see me. I've noticed most people have been standing on this side, so
sorry, can I ask a question? If people don't take notes, there'll be lots of checklist information.
There's a set of plans on.
I see the plans, I just need to know.
Yeah.
yeah, so
I'll just do a few introductions. I'm Mark, landscape architect. I've lived in Wellington for about 14 years, but grew up in the South Island. This is Dan, my business partner, who grew up in England, but moved to New Zealand about the same time as I moved to Wellington and lived in Aro Valley for a while. Together we run Local, our landscape architecture collective, just off Cuba Street. A lot of people think landscape architects just come in and chuck a few plants around after the architect's finished, but there's a bit more to it, particularly with a project like this. Generally, we take everything from the building line out to the boundary, and so that can encapsulate anything from paving to playgrounds, fencing to lawns and parks and planting as well. One of the biggest things that I try and do is, in my job, is communication. So listening really hard to what are the desired outcomes and trying to add a bit of creativity in how we interpret those things that we've heard. Ultimately, landscape is an expression of culture and values, and so what we're proposing here tonight is something that we've listened, or tried to listen really hard in terms of what your values are, and so we're really interested to see how well we've done.
yeah, and I think to add to that, what we're showing isn't the finished item, isn't this is what you're going to get. What we're showing here is a whole heap of ideas that we've come up with. We've listened to what's been said, we've talked to people, and we've looked at the site and we've wandered around the site in the rain and in the sunshine, and come up with lots of little or big ideas. Maybe they're not big enough, maybe they're not little enough, but this is an opportunity to talk about those. And how we've done it is we've split those all up. So there's a plan that you've probably all seen on your chairs, which is at the back of that set, which is kind of everything thrown onto one page. We're not necessarily suggesting that's what we do. So what we've done on the slides here, and there's about 20 of them, so we'll go through them relatively quickly, otherwise we'll be here till midnight. But what we try to do is separate those out so we can have those conversations about key things, and then we've shown how they all work together. They're not all ideas that can be delivered on day one, and that's not how things grow anyway. and in terms of plants, but in terms of landscapes as well. And what we see is that there's an opportunity here to work and come up with ideas that may take a long time to germinate, a long time to appear, and could be things that could be driven differently, rather than by council or by individuals. They could be driven by the group and collective workings. So there's lots of things here. There's things that some of you guys might be quite passionate about. There's some of the things that you might be lukewarm about. But hopefully there's some things in there that can start that conversation and we can latch onto and go, right, that's actually cool. And that's what collectively we want to push forward and we can start developing. So this was for the fair. I was going to say a month ago, but my memory of time is it's probably longer than that. But we popped these posters up, which were just some precedent images, some ideas, and some pulling out some words and some themes from the consultation and conversations to date. So it's from those workshops, from individual conversations, but from collective thoughts as well. So there was just some words there that really sort of pulled those together. The slide that appeared for a few seconds, I'll talk about while it reappears. One of our initial sort of reactions, I guess, to the site was the sort of bizarre sort of nature of it, and the fact that it's this sort of collection of spaces that have sort of grown, and there's a sort of we had this sort of conversation between Mark and myself about sort of how do we rationalise this, and I'm going, actually that's completely the wrong solution. We shouldn't be rationalising it. We should be embracing. And one of those things which we thought was an interesting thing to test, which is what this slide was beginning to do, and this was one of the very, very early sketches, a bit raw, but sort of was this compartmentalising the site, which is the drawing on the left, which is, we've got a park, which is green, we've got a building, we've got a basketball court, which is rectangular. And how we could actually start to get those things to overlap and to talk to each other and to merge together. And to do that in terms of how the ground plays out and how the design can play out, but also how the uses play out, so that things stop being this is here and this is here, so the park and the green is over there, and then we've got asphalt over here. How do we overlap those things? How do we create the benefits of that bit over here and vice versa? There's a few other little diagram arrows on there which we could go into, but we'll skip over. But one of the key ones is that movement through, which came up in lots of conversations in terms of cyclists and the diagonal sort of quick route to town from the valley. I'm not going to read this page, but this was here really for anyone who picked up this document without us talking to it, and really explains that there's a whole heap of ideas here, and they're here to test them. They're here so that we can latch on to a few of them and push those forwards. They're sort of kick-starting that process. They're about us dipping our toes in the water and going, oh, what about this? And then we can explore those further. So this isn't a finished design, so that's the critical thing here. So this is kind of the starting point of where we've been looking at, and John will come and talk about the building at some point during this. We've got some slides that sort of fit in amongst this, so John will talk about that. But we've been looking at the landscape, and we've been concentrating on this area, but we've got some slides that pull that out to the wider park. And just to orientate yourself, just so that everyone's, because sometimes things are difficult, but preschool, halls, basketball court, hopefully that's obvious, and murals and so forth, and the big hill over there. So we're looking down on the site. And all the slides are of that same view, so hopefully, if it works properly, these should all overlap and we should be able to turn on little ideas and flick through those quickly.
And we've done that quite specifically because landscape, like I said, is often made up of lots of little things, and not all of those things necessarily have to happen. So we're here to hear which things are well supported and which are not. So we thought a good way of presenting that is to present them individually. but at the end we'll show them how they would look all together.
And it's not about the plan. And so often you look at plans and it's all about sort of pattern making from the sky. Hence why we're trying to do it in a bit of 3D. So hopefully that works. It's been a bit of a head scratch to get it to work.
It's also good to note that none of these are resolved. We didn't want to go putting a whole lot of detail and time into designing any particular element until we could kind of show you the idea and get some feedback on those. So don't necessarily take any of these as a finished design. But first up, there is the bunker, which one of the things we've really tried to do is retain a sense of memory wherever we can. So for example, that applies to the garages and what we looked at there. But also with the bunker, there are some issues with the structure that make it difficult to retain. There's also issues with demolishing it totally. There's costs with that. So a good in-between measure we thought was to retain the base, the foundation, and some of the walls, which can be almost partially demolished in a sort of folly and then built into. So we're retaining some of that infrastructure in order to save cost, but also to retain a bit of memory. Some overlays that could go in there are anything from fairly decorative pergola elements to a pergola that could become a really playful thing that people could inhabit and put swings on. It could also be used as storage. And then the obvious one of, I think it's been mentioned before, of turning it into a stage and a venue for many things.
Yeah. And I guess that point about the memory of the site is something that we've tried to, that's a theme that runs through hopefully all of our drawings. What we're not showing here is sort of wipe it all aside and start again, let's do something. What we're showing is iterations, little things, little tweaks, little growths, little germinations of idea that all retain that memory of the site. So that whether or not that's that memory of the way the site's grown and the sort of strange sort of relationship of buildings, or memory of objects, or memories of whatever activities and so forth. So,
which is a really great thing culturally in terms of its memory. It's also a good thing in terms of cost. It's also a good thing ecologically, which has been one of the prime drivers to try and reuse as much as we can.
Yeah. So that's that sort of bang for buck, I guess, in terms of ecology, but also financially. That if we can make little moves that have a big impact, then that's great. So there's a few things that probably need to happen, and those are making sure the hall's accessible and all those good things. So that connection from the halls down into the landscape is really important. And making sure that connection on the front door of the halls is also addressing the green park as well as the hard landscape. So how that works and creating spaces that could be little stages or whatever, or opportunities to sit. So trying to, rather than just create a flight of steps, it's how those flight of steps could be used in different ways. So again, getting that back. So that's probably an easy one in terms of it's something that has to happen, whether or not it's in that configuration, and then the rest of them get a little bit more interesting.
I have to say this is my favourite slide of all of them, partly because it's an ecological overlay is a really low-cost way of getting some really strong improvement in a site, both in terms of its amenity, but also in terms of opportunities for kids to learn and immerse themselves in playful elements that are nature-based, and also improve the ecological value on the site. At the moment there's a lot of hard surfaces, and it doesn't have to be that way. So there's a few opportunities where that can be inserted, and these are really indicative, whether they're this big or they're reduced in size or in different locations. There's a fair amount of flexibility there. The thinking behind some of these though is, as Dan mentioned, there's the ramps and steps that need to get up to the hall. Initially there was just a ramp kind of on its own, but this patch of cabbage trees and kowhai trees out there happen to have quite a nice gradient coming up through the soil, so there's an opportunity to take the ramp up through there, which could save some money in terms of infrastructure, but also uses that part of the site when it's not currently that accessible, and encourages people to get up there. And I can imagine kids getting up there and then exploring further into the vegetation. Equally on this side of the site, there's opportunities in the preschool to really develop the playground in really low cost and affordable ways. And the kind of elements that we're talking about are pretty simple rocks and logs. That's actually a rain garden, so it's taking in the water that comes into the site and uses that for passive irrigation as well as filtering it. And I know there's been some efforts to mark the stream location, which have proved quite difficult because it's so far down. But one way of engaging with that idea is to think about how we treat the water that lands on the site and how we can improve it before it gets down into there. So of course there's the environmental plus, but there's also educational benefits of that when kids start to understand that connection. And that's what this is all about, is getting kids into that zone, particularly in the preschool, but in other areas as well.
And I think that opportunity with the preschool to really integrate the preschool into the surrounding landscape, we've got a couple more slides in terms of fences and how that could be treated, but it's not about pinching their land, it's about them integrated into the wider landscape. And we've had a few conversations with the guys there about some of those real opportunities for nature play, for learning at that really young age, and getting your feet dirty and all those good things as well. So that's something that sort of driven some of these ideas. And I think the other quick thing on that slide, and I'm conscious of time, we're already racing and we're probably going way too slow. The other thing on that slide is just about the borehole and the infrastructure that needs to go around that, which we're still investigating, and drinking fountains and how that area and how we can talk about that as an opportunity. So in terms of the fence itself, we've got another slide, but I think Matt just wanted to talk about.
Yeah, I personally, this is possibly one of the strongest and most likely of the elements to go ahead. I may be wrong on that, but who knows? Mainly because I think it can take so many of the ideas that have been expressed. This is a pretty simple illustration of what we had in mind, but really that fence line is an area that can pack a lot of objects. It has a lot of interaction. It's really in the crux of the site. It's where some of the key problems are in terms of density and bikes going to and forth. But that density also creates a really strong interaction in the community. And so we can see this object containing many different things, seating being the starting point, but that could also incorporate some of the food gardens that have been kept going to date. It could also incorporate some of the composting or room gardens that could feed directly in to the veggie garden. We understand that there's plenty of people wanting to put compost in, but not a huge demand for taking compost out. So that could be a really easy way of getting the compost into the food producing gardens. So the community can use that, but also the preschool is a really good teaching tool for kids to be able to grow their own plants and learn about nutrient cycles and that sort of thing. So like I said, this is just a starting point, but as an element, the idea is that could pack a lot of punch in terms of incorporating a lot of ideas.
Yeah, and then how you play with the fence as well. So there's a couple of things, well there's probably three key moves on here we've sort of started to investigate. One is getting these little glimpse views through, so how you create something that's sort of a bit playful. So maybe that's cutting little circles in that piece of wall, so that kids can peer through little perspex holes and look up the street and vice versa. There's obviously making sure there's clear sight lines into the playground from both the hall and people coming around the corner and so forth, to make sure it's safe, and if you've got kids over there while you're in here, you can see what's going on. So all those good things. But there's an opportunity there to be a bit more playful than what we've currently got outside. There's that great fence up at the zoo, which is full of plastic bottles that have all been stuck in a chain link fence that creates this beautiful organic sort of sculptural element. So there's things like that which don't have to cost a great deal of money, but can be really cool. So this is beginning to sort of test and experiment that. And just a quick do you drawing. The next one is sort of looking at the basketball court, and this was us sort of testing whether or not, and we've been out on site a number of times at various different times of day, and more often than not, there's a group of guys or group of people playing basketball on one of the hoops, and the ball keeps going over the fence and various things. But generally a group playing on a half court, not a full court game. So this was saying, well, why don't we play with that idea and actually have something that's central, that the ball's unlikely to go over the fence, which would be useful. It's something that we could have maybe hoops at different levels for different age groups, and it's something that encourages that sort of playing together rather than having something that's a basketball court. When there's a group of people on it, you kind of feel as if you shouldn't cross the yellow line and interact with it, but something that's a little bit more sculptural. Maybe it is really sculptural, and it becomes a sculpture that has the basketball hoops as part of it, but it's something that's a bit more playful, which then allows us to play around with the other area and overlay it with things. So maybe there's some markings in there for different types of games, or little bike tracks or things as well. So there's some opportunities to be a bit more playful with that whole area. And maybe it's something that allows you to, it's the central pole for a tent structure. So for events, you can pop a tent out there, and it's a multi-functional object that allows this thing to clip on, so that you've got something there that you can play with. Not quite sure how we do that one, but I'm sure we can.
Unlikely to be permanent in Wellington's winter, but if you've got a pole there for the basketball court, then it could be an
now these couple of slides, there's two slides here that kind of go together, and there might even be one that comes after that, or maybe it's something that continues. But this was looking at the garages and the end of that site. At the moment, it's very much a dead end. You've got this sort of echo box of concrete walls and things around the basketball court, which sort of makes it feel a very hard environment. So sort of reintroducing the hill was our sort of term, and the idea of putting some of that ecology back in and doing something relatively cheap, but putting some earth in there, getting some stuff, the fruit trees that are around, maybe those go in. Maybe it's playful with the slide and so forth.
And much more likely to be successful for the fruit trees on there because it's made ground, so we get to dictate what sort of soil it is, as opposed to where they've been planted currently, where they're struggling because of the soil type. But underneath that could be a whole permaculture meadow where wildflowers are encouraged and the bee population is helped down a little bit.
And then maybe the next stage of this is that the garages, we partly demolish some of those. We take the tops off, so that becomes a platform. That could be a platform that's used for parking cars. It could be a platform used for other things, parking bikes, parking electric car charging points, whatever those be, or for other events or so forth. But it also allows us to connect that soft connection up onto the road behind. So rather than this being the back of the site, it becomes another front door, and it's about that inviting and welcoming. And maybe there's another slide after this. So it's this evolution of the site is kind of what we're trying to sort of get at here, and how that could work. A bit like I'm racing now, so because we keep getting told we're running out of time, so I'll keep going. So sorry if I'm going too fast. As well as the central tent idea, we thought the idea of having poles with power on the top of them that could allow bunting to be connected to them and allow lights to be strung for events, that sort of thing, but the power's there, a bit like the Christmas decorations down on Main Street. The power's there, the pole's there, and the lights can be put up for events.
And a much more intensive treatment of light right at the nexus of the problem point in terms of cycles and pedestrians. So really alerting people that it's a busy area.
And making sure there's power points out in the landscape for events as well. So you've got power where you're likely to put a stage, power whether or not we've got the right places, but working through where those right places are, and the Wi-Fi.
I also kind of like the way it kind of stitches the site together in a kind of metaphorical way, as could this element which would run underneath it, which has the potential to kind of bring in the elements from the park and draw them across. We actually don't imagine we would design this. We'd really love to work with an artist who might, get involved with the community to develop something really site responsive.
So
And some of that could be textured so that it signals to bikes that they have to slow down. You incorporate signage, paving games, the basketball games, really layer it up.
And there's a really nice way there that we can get, as Mike was saying, getting that texture in to slow cycles down. But also, there's a few potholes and things like that, bits that you need to patch. So rather than doing the sort of motorway scenario where we just go through and we re-asphalt the whole area, actually patching the bits that are broken and using that as part of the design could be quite cool. So you're kind of playing around with those sort of patchwork quilt and actually using that as part of a design tool rather than something we're worried about. So that, I think, is the image that you've probably got in the back of your pack. So that's got everything in. That one actually might go a little bit further afield because we're now showing the full area. Little plays around, so maybe some of these great ideas over here can happen in the rest of the park as well. Maybe they shouldn't, but there's some ideas there beginning to pull those ideas out across the wider park and actually talking about it as one space. So that's probably where we.
Did anybody have any questions on clarification on anything before we leave the stage?
I'd like to know if these will be available electronically to people around at the meeting tonight.
Definitely, yes.
I guess that they're on the website. And there's a link on the most recent email to anyone who would have got it.
So if we hand over to John.
Sorry, what question?
Sorry.
Just another question. I mean, it seems like kind of the elephant in this room, in the site, is bicycles and pedestrians of all ages, the kids that are going to the preschool. Any bright ideas on how to make it safer with that kind
With
of
that
traffic?
conflict
Yeah, I think it's a combination of things. So the lighting is intended to add to safety, light obviously. The paving art would lend itself into anything from a different texture of paving. I don't know if you've noticed the really coarse green cycleway markings on the road, that sort of thing, essentially creating judder bars for cyclists that aren't trip hazards. Signage, I would imagine it's a variety of things. If anybody else has any brighter ideas than that, then we'd be happy to incorporate them.
But nothing so drastic as changing the pattern of use. I mean, people and cyclists would still go their same route through the site.
Well, I don't know if there's any other way other than through this little nexus, and I think part of the solution may be a cycleway on the road so that there is a safe route that cyclists don't have to use through here, but that's kind of...
Yeah, there's some good bits, and there's some little interesting bits along the waterfront where you've got the timber bridges as a good example, where you get a bit of texture, and those are generally the narrow bits along the waterfront, so you go for along the edge of Franklin's Park, it's big and wide and it's fast, and then the actual tight bit on the bridge is actually not where the issues happen because cyclists are slowing down because of that texture on the ground, and maybe a bit of noise, there's a bit of rumbling. So those things that if we can work with some of those ideas to slow people down, and actually having a lot of people coming together at one point, there was a comment when we were talking to somebody about this is a really great bit of the site because you always catch people's eyes, everyone looks at each other, so actually having that bit where everyone meets is really positive, so we don't want to lose that.
Okay, we're going to move on to John, and I'm going to hold the clarified questions to the end because John may answer them as a result of the stage. So just make a note, I'm just really aware of people's time, so I've got a few nods for that,
Hi everyone, I'm John Socker from Avcc. Probably some of you have seen me before here. Also here's Sam Van Zolen from our office who's been part of this whole deal. And I would just like to thank everybody who has contributed to where we've got to today. We've had inquiry by design workshops, we've preceded that with the fair, we've after that we've had a residency here, and we have had a lot of input, and we'd like to say thank you for that because those are the source of the ideas that you've heard already tonight from Mark and Dan, and the synthesis of those is what will eventuate in your new building and your new landscape. And I hope that what you have seen here today, just earlier, shows that we are not just considering this building as an object in a landscape. It is a building that is integrated and engages with the landscape, and the landscape engages with the building. Because that's, taking it as a whole, is how we get something that works together and works in an integrated manner. And when looking at the buildings, I wanted to just mention where we'd come from. We come from where we started with all the engagement and the community ideas, and we came up with 5 original different schemes, 2 of which were for new buildings and 3 of which were for different variations on the theme of retaining this hall. And what we're showing tonight, which has been up previously, is sort of the culmination and the collective information from all those schemes put together in the best way possible. And that's set against some constraints. You know, we've got some boundaries, we've got some costs, we've got where we get the biggest bang for the buck. And so while we can get some nice big hits in the landscape at a lower cost, when it comes to the building, some of the hits are more costly. I also wanted to say that we've tried to synthesise from you what works now and what doesn't work now, and put that into this building and look at the multiple uses of the hall. And if I can move forward, there's one thing I wanted just to point out before we go through there. This whole business of these pinch points through here between the preschool and the building, we've tried to keep the deck spaces, the engagement spaces, away from there to keep that width as wide as possible. And that's why you'll see, when we go on to the next slide, you'll see that the decks are pulled away from this corner so that they engage with the space out here, and they engage out to the park and down to Aro Street. The other things that we have tried to do is we've tried to keep this space, which we're told is really a nice space and an appropriate size. We've tried to keep this as much in its current form as we can, and then surround it and add to it. And you can see, I don't know whether you can see from the back, you can see that this red line here is the outline of where we are now, and this is the additions around it. So there's some reconfiguration, and the other things we tried to do is to make this expandable, so that we've got a space that would go through there with sliding doors, so that we'd be able to expand there, and we'd be able to expand further out into a courtyard, so that if you were using this for a large function, for a private function, you'd be able to have outside space as well as inside space, and you'd be able to have multiple uses. Equally, at each end, you could use those spaces individually for smaller groups and still have access to the hall. We've also got a bigger kitchen, we've got improved storage areas, and we've got a new office, and we've got upgraded and extended toilet facilities. So that's the sort of functionality. And then we go on again, how it looks and how it interacts. The framing of the decks is designed to make the decks orient towards the outside spaces, so to entrap the view a wee bit, both from the outside space back to the building and from inside the building to the outside space, so they're a little bit directional. So because we've got sort of these 3 parts, we've got the sort of the pinch point just out here, and we've got the basketball court out there, and we've got the park out there. We just need to acknowledge that and work with it rather than against it. And I think, as Mark and Dan were saying, facing up to some of the issues about conflicting uses of the pinch points is not a silver bullet. One thing can fix it, but it's a multimodal approach of having texture, having lighting, having soft edges, having a little bit of notional constraint to slow people down, maybe some bollards, maybe some change in grade that is just additive to slow people down through there, rather than to stop the bikes entirely, just to limit their speed, so that it becomes a shared space rather than a space where speed dominates. So that's all I wanted to say. I wanted to just check what I said everything. So what I wanted to do was to make sure that not only the inside space but the outside space, through this team approach with you, with us interpreting for you, actually gives you the range of opportunities you want to do, all the activities you do now and ones you want to do in the future.
I'm aware it's like a running joke that designers can't keep time in their presentations, but I also respect that the complexity of actually talking through a design takes time. So I've allowed that to overrun, and I take responsibility for that. But I do want to give you guys, time to talk about this now. I'm just going to turn these lights on so we can actually work. Before we move on to you giving your feedback, can I just check there's no more clarifying questions, just to understand what's in front of you today?
Is the garages in or out? Because talking to according to the plans, it says that the garages aren't included in the project, but then you're talking about the garages in the presentation.
Which one of you wants to say?
I can probably. Do you want to say that?
Just from the point, just speaking from the point of view of the project, because the garages have recently been identified as quite prone, they're going to require structural upgrade work, and perhaps Teresa can say what the council's plans are in that regard. But anything that happens to the garages have been excluded from the project as a result. Because they weren't accounted for in the budget of the project, so it's kind of been deferred. And
I guess to reiterate the landscape drawings, there's a lot of ideas here, and we're not suggesting that all of those are built as part of the initial project. But what we're thinking and what we're drawing here is some long-term goals and visions as well, so that these can be built on. And that when we're making moves now, we understand what could happen in the future, and we know what we'd like to do in the future, and so we're pushing the boundaries of what's been shown more than what necessarily is going to be built in the short term.
And I think that also raises the opportunity for the community to fund and engage with parts of those processes.
And to begin to have that conversation around what the garages should be.
Okay, thanks, Dan.
That was actually my question, like what is the boundary on funding? Has there been any look at sort of fundraising and getting funds from outside? Is that...
I did have in my slide, the budget from the council is 1.2 million, and we did have a lot of conversations with the Aro Valley Community Council about other fundraising. There are lottery funds available for community facilities and a variety of other things, so that definitely can be explored.
Once we've worked out what it is specifically that the community wants, and then whether we've got the funds for that, then we can kind of look at what's available.
And there's so many opportunities, particularly in the landscape, to be involved as well. So I spent a beautiful few days up at the zoo with the zoo crew, planting up with locals, and that was something that was going to cost $25,000 worth of a contractor planting, and actually the community was super quick and did all that planting, and it didn't cost anything, and it was a wonderful thing. We had fun doing it, and it was a great opportunity. So there's opportunities within certainly the landscape to stretch budgets and do all that sort of stuff.
Hey, I'm a fairly new resident, and I've heard community a lot. Obviously, it's a key focus. I mean, I've heard vision and the long-term plan in the future. What was the demographics of the people participating in the consultation?
Very interesting question. Shall I answer that one?
Yes.
Interestingly, when you look at the research into participatory design, demographics is not a good driver of good design. So whilst the plan to allocate the funding was very strongly based on demographics and that sort of research, as policy should be, demographics isn't the best driver because actually your ethnicity or your age doesn't actually necessarily relate to the way that you use a landscape. So you might look at other factors, other sorts of ways of looking at different sorts of people. So we did definitely speak to the different sorts of use of the landscape people that represented that.
And having said that, I must sort of say that there was a reasonable amount of diversity in the participation. From AVCC point of view, we wanted to get everybody involved that we could, especially people we thought, couldn't make a special effort that might normally be marginalised from that kind of conversation. In the end, the people who came.
I think it's an appropriate time to ask this question. Someone raised the point about extra funding, and I am very interested in that aspect. I'm surprised that we've said this is how much money we've got, what can we do with it, rather than what would we like as a community and how much would that cost. And researching all of the other recent community centres, Newlands, Johnsonville, Kandala and the Karori Event Centre, all of those, the community have contributed substantial funds, and two of those, the majority of the funds.
I'm
but
going to
we have
save
never
this
asked.
into the feedback session because I know it fits well there, and I'd really appreciate you including it in that. Is there anything else to clarify the design before you move into giving feedback?
Clarifying, because the future of the tennis pavilion was never discussed during consultation, not while I was there, I thought we were going to get several plans. One, this is what we discussed recently, that we would get a plan that showed how it could be incorporated. Whereas I just wanted a clarification that none of these designs include that building.
I can speak to the consultation which I know did discuss the pavilions, and then for instance in the concept designs where we looked at those range of different pick and mix ideas, everybody who was interviewed, it was pointed out to them that the pavilion was changing in the ways that were shown in the plans, and they were given the opportunity to give feedback on. So I can speak to the fact that that did happen.
I gave feedback to Teresa at one of those sessions that I was very concerned that the pavilion had not been included.
I'm going to say that feedback.
Okay.
Clarify what's happening
Clarifying that we're
Do you
not
want to
discussing a plan that includes the pavilion.
It includes
That we have tried to include a vision for it, and quite an open vision too. We're not necessarily saying that the functional purpose has to be one thing. We're really keen to retain some parts of it, but we understand that it's not a safe building and that some work needs to be done to it. And it's really up to the community how far that goes in terms of what work is done to it. If it is decided in the end that it's rebuilt and enclosed, that's the best stream for the money, then so be it. We've kind of pitched it in what we've shown in our drawings as a middle ground, where we've kept some of it and used that structure to accommodate some of the other things that have come through through the consultation. But we're keen to hear other ideas about how we can best use that space.
Russell.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify the question of the garages. So that's no longer in the scope of the design brief, but is it still within the scope of this community to have a say about what happens there?
I think that is exactly the reason it's on the landscape designs, is to allow you to do that. Is that fair? That's
The answer is
yes.
yes.
Easy.
was interested in the conversations that seem to be assumed around the fact that the architecture is intended to slow down bicycles. Slowing down bicycles is not a difficult task in my mind. It's also very much a shared space between bicycles.
I'm going to be really going to say feedback session and I'll
No, this is not feedback session. We haven't mentioned automobiles. I want to know where they come and go by and where they park in this facility. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Clarify where the cars go.
Not clarification, first mention of cars.
Yeah, clarify where the cars go on the site. Thank you.
There's a couple of,
There's an existing access way from Aro Street that comes through here that is not impeded by any of this, and we have wanted to fold back this corner here to give a secondary access from Palmer Street for occasional use, though it would not be open during normal usage. That would be closed down for only pedestrians and bicycles.
And skateboards and everything else, right? Because it's the only pedestrian highway in the city, and it's developed through people walking and voting with their feet.
and the other critical thing in terms of parking and vehicles is that for the preschool to operate, they need 3 car parking spots, which is those 3 that are still shown as
That's an
locations.
assumption. They can park anywhere. Just
There
pointing
needs,
out that.
there needs to be 3 off street,
they don't
off
have to be
street.
there.
No, they don't have to be there. No, not at all. That's an option.
Thank you.
But there does need to be 3 off street car parking spots.
There's also community parking.
Okay, I'm going to move us on to feedback because I feel like we're bursting to do that. And I'm going to do it in a very Scottish way. I'm going to ask you first of all, just for 10 minutes to work in pairs. And you're going to have a rollicking good argument with your partner, alright? I really want you to go there. One of you is a cynic about everything you've heard tonight. You're just going to be cynical about every aspect of the plan that you can see. The other of you is, hallelujah, I believe in this. And you're going to express your belief in it.
This is the first chance we've ever had as a community to discuss this concept of development. And I suspect we're going to be asked to vote on it tonight. How enthusiastic we are to talk about this project, but now you're asking us to role play.
It's not role play, it's taking position. So don't be mine, you know I'm not full. Okay, so you've got 10 minutes in pairs just to play out your perspectives as citizen leaders. You're then going to be back to the whole So the first thing I want to do is, firstly, wow, you clearly have a view. Terrific place to start. First thing I want to do is hear from the cynics. When you were talking to your believer, what did you hear that despite your cynicism, you believed it?
Nothing.
Nothing from Russell? What did you hear? Texture on the ground. Texture on the ground. Okay. Anybody else that despite being cynical, something just pushed you over? Anything else? Okay.
It's going to be an improvement.
It's going to be an improvement. Now, believers, going the other way, despite you being the hallelujah for the designs, what did you hear that despite really believing in the designs you were cynical about?
That maybe this hill along the mural wall and connection to April Smith isn't appealing to everyone because people like the fact that it's closed off and they can protect their children from wandering away. So that gave me some something to think about.
Thank you. What else?
Hi. Something I am a believer, and something that sort of stopped me in my tracks is that these are all of the possibilities, but I guess what we don't know is, like, in terms of budget, what can and can't we have? Do we have to pick one and then see what money's left over, or I guess what's sort of the realism of it for me?
Thank you.
Yeah, and just to sort of build on that a little bit, I mean, for example, the $1.2 million, does that
can that pay for the building? You know, can that pay for the pavilion and the decks, for example? You know, and if money has to come from fundraising above and beyond that, what is each piece of the project we've been shown today going to cost?
Have you got a darker pen, Anne?
I don't, and interestingly, these pens are really dark on every other whiteboard, but for some reason they're not. So in the budget, can we afford a whiteboard?
Please, topography and aspect make that end of the basketball court a very dark shady place for growing plants.
I'll put BB court equals shading. Yes. Full growing. Okay. Lexi.
We need more storage.
Storage. Increase. Okay.
One of the main things I thought was to integrate the park with the preschool so that you could be sitting having a picnic in the park and see your kids playing in the preschool. And that also the little nexus that that is the main pinch point and one of the major problems of this site would actually be widened and not be in the nexus, the little pinch point that it is with the conflict of use that it has now. And I was involved in site development even years ago, proposing that it's always been the main focus of everything is actually removing this little nexus, the pinch point thing.
Okay, pinch point widening.
And also limiting ourselves to the budget that we've got now. We need to be thinking big, I think.
Limiting to budget from what we can see.
Something's burning over there.
Yeah. And the community centre. Sorry, I can't hear.
The budget is limiting us for what we really want. For instance, it's limiting, it seems to be limiting us to leaving the existing building in its present location, which has a lot to do with a number of issues that we're hearing about pinching of space. So we've made big compromises because of the budget limit. Is there, I guess, the other question is there other ways of maximum increasing the budget?
So I thought the expanded hall was a great idea. We could have a bigger dance class here, but Mike Sinek explained exactly that. Why do we need a bigger hall? I mean, do we need a bigger hall here in Aro Valley? Is anyone calling out for one?
Yes.
Could we have an answer on that?
Well, wasn't it that people wanted more meeting rooms so that if we have meetings, we only can cancel the hall users so that people can still have meetings, smaller groups can meet, that sort of stuff. Because that is a big need for
That's what we want to spend, our 600,000 left to do. Just a question.
Or 1.2 million? Or
No, there's not 1.2 million left. Well, that's already been spent. Does anyone want to give us the remaining budget? No. What? I don't understand the question.
Sorry, in terms of, so money's already been spent obviously on the consultation and design, that's what I think Ingrid's getting at. So
What
so
do
how
we
much
have left of the budget?
to do the actual building work?
Alright, so what's the available project budget minus professional fees, you mean?
Well, sure. I mean, we've already spent a lot on everything we've done to date. We haven't even got a set of construction documents. We'd have to get to there, and then there's a construction budget. It's nowhere near, it's not going to be anywhere near $1 million.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
So I'd just like to know if
explained that
anyone's keeping a
previously.
tally of how much money we have left.
Like about 800,000 each, is it?
Sorry.
I think it's only about 800,000 here, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think it's something that Wellington City Council can explain, that you've got the construction budget was always going to be something like, it's always around about that proportion of the total project cost. So the construction budget will be about, 2/3, something like that, maybe a bit more. And so whereas, but I don't know how much that's not the same as what we've got left. You know what I'm saying? The construction budget versus, of course, what we've got, what the council's got left is much more than the construction budget. Yeah.
Well, we're not even close to construction, so there's going to be a lot of cost to get to construction.
Okay, can I clarify, when you set the budget at the beginning, there was money put aside for construction, money put aside for getting to the point of construction?
I thought the whole envelope was 1.2,
and we're
that was
still
what I was
within
told.
the proportions that you plan to be within? I think that's what is being asked. Are we on track?
I understand the question.
We're struggling, aren't we?
It's
Okay.
1.2 million, the cost that we, the money we have for everything.
The
like-
total budget cost is
Yeah,
correct.
for all of
Okay,
it.
Yeah.
and how much of the 1.2 million is to build the stuff and landscape the stuff that we see on the plans?
Do you
What
recall
percentage
offhand?
of that?
Do you
Is
recall
it
offhand?
800,000, is it 900,000?
We haven't made those decisions, because we do have consultants that are working on the project, so we're still costing a lot. We don't have costs for the landscape yet, so we're still working through all of that. That hasn't been decided. So we don't have a budget specifically for landscape versus building, and we're still working through all of those. And we also have a contingency, which is kind of a reserve that we, if things are discovered that we need to fix. For example, asbestos. There is asbestos in this building and the surrounding buildings as well. So we need to think about those things as part of that budget as well. So we don't have specifics on all of those because we're very early in design. We still have a lot more design to go forward.
To help us prioritise our design, we kind of need to have some idea of how far we can go. I mean, for us, if we say, this is a great plan, build us this, and then you come back and say, actually, $800,000 will buy you this, this and this. We need some scope so that we can match what we're asking for with what you can provide.
Absolutely. And we don't have all those costs yet because we're at the concept stage for landscape. So we are asking, what is your most, what of all of these do you really, really like? And then we'll have to come back.
So I guess that's the heart of my question. Do we really, is this building what we want to spend our money on, or these great landscape ideas what we want to spend our money on? Just I'm trying to be realistic. What if this building is fine and we want to build some of these landscape instead? We don't have money for both, from what I can tell.
We do have money for both, but not for everything of both. Does that make sense?
And also the funding isn't necessarily exclusively coming from council. I really encourage you to look at other funding models and not limit yourself to the current budget. Like Dan said, this is a master plan for the future and there's lots of different agencies that can provide funding.
I agree with that. I guess we've been narrowed into this.
I'm going to interrupt for a minute. I know that a decision was made to come back to you before full costing so that you could have a say in what went into that costing process, because the costing process costs money in itself. So does that make sense? That you're being asked before things are costed, what needs to be costed?
Well, people are using a cost to express, to say we can't have things. But if we wanted to dream, maybe there are people saying, no, this building has asbestos. We actually want to move and have a new building that starts on Able, Smith Street, and goes into the basketball court and move the basketball court where the building is. Just an example of how I feel like we're being narrowed into things unnecessarily, but then also told to stay open. And I guess I just don't understand which I'm supposed to be doing. Staying open and saying, oh, okay, if this is the best we can do, yeah, it looks fine. Or say, well, really, maybe we should fight for more money and do something we really want.
I think there's something that probably is worth saying, just from some informed about this from being on the steering group, is that just a broad distinction between how far the architectural design of the building has come versus where the landscape design proposals and how far they've been developed. So the architecture design has come further, and part of its development has included a consideration of cost within the likely budget. So within that 1.2, not all of it's construction cost, and it's been developed along the lines of that budget. More detailed cost estimates are still underway, so there's still architecture. We know that we've got a fairly good idea, just logically, that not all of what we've been presented can be included within the overall budget of the project. So there will be some decisions that need to be made there about what can be included now. But as Mark and Dan have explained, there may be aspects to some of those landscape design elements that there's an element of community build and fundraising around those. And also some of those are aspects of what you might think of as a strategic plan for the future. For example, anything that's, I think Teresa can correct me if I'm wrong, but anything that's within the fence line of the preschool playground is something that will need to be deferred a little while till that actually properly comes up in the council's budget planning, and I can't remember the exact dates. And likewise with the garages and anything associated with those, that's something that needs to be deferred until it's into a future process when Wellington City Council knows what to do about those buildings seismically. So just wanting to draw that distinction about what we're seeing with the landscape design versus the architecture, if that helps.
If I can add to that, just before we get to other comments, I think that it's really important to understand in terms of a design process. You start with the big issues, and as you progress, you get further and further into detail. Likewise with budgeting, you start with the big issues, and if you've got a choice between a new building and an existing building, those are big chunky amounts of money that you can make early decisions about, whereas the finer points and the smaller bits of the design that have lesser impact, you have to wait until you have more information and you drill down into the design, into the finer grain, before you have sufficient information to be informed.
Costing could take a certain amount of information and design development to get an accurate costing, and we didn't want to come to you today with resolved computer drawings that tell you how to build it. We wanted to come with some illustrated drawings to give you a flavour of what we're suggesting, to get your feedback on that before we do anything more detailed. And so there will be, that sort of costing information will come out in due course, not at this time.
I was just going to say, that as far as fundraising goes, it's actually, it won't necessarily take a lot of fundraising, because there's groups like the Wellington Community Trust and Ottawa and stuff that you would just apply things, and they have lots of money that you could have. Lots and lots of money that could potentially be done with budget or something. So it's not necessarily that hard. Is what I'm saying,
particularly for like ecological things or educational things, they're all well supported.
Okay, no, I'll come to you.
Yeah, it just strikes me that it seems like there's a bit of a chicken and egg situation going on, because we've been kind of corralled into a design process thinking that this is the one way we're going with the funding, whereas if there's an opportunity to get more funding, that might have changed the design process entirely. And it kind of, I feel like the current design, I'm cynical about the budget, because $1.2 million doesn't get you much today. Houses cost that much to build, small houses, and we're trying to get a community centre together, and as well as the wider kind of environs of the community centre. And it's a long-term situation. I feel like potentially dealing with this building as it is now is not looking at the long-term possibilities for the site. it's like it feels like it's an immediate solution that uses the money, but it's not kind of like a master plan over time.
Thank you.
Largely agree with that. And just, John, can you just clarify the big decisions that you made to get within the present 1.2 budget were what?
Not doing new building, not doing the relocating the building or turning the building and having additions as well. Those are the key decisions.
I'm just really questioning the process here this evening. You've got meeting must finish by 9:30, is that correct?
That's not
Well, that's always been the custom with any general meeting, that any people who wanted to continue discussion after 9:30 was shut down. I just wanted to check for that tonight. There's a meeting to due to close at 9:30.
Not to my knowledge. I am happy to stay here till we're done.
Because
I'll lock the doors if it takes
think, in terms of the decanting and the time frame that you put to the future, that tonight there's too much still to be discussed for any decision to be made by this community about what it wants. And I think this meeting needs to have a further series of meetings to discuss what's going on, and I really think that all consultants should be put on hold. I'm really concerned about the money that has been sucked out of this community, or what could be spent in this community, paying people who don't live in this community, when there's plenty of people in this community who could be doing it themselves. And I would really like to propose that, you know, you're not talking about doing anything until next year anyway, in terms of construction, and so I think the whole thing should be put on hold to enable further discussion to occur in the community and for there to be a genuine decision of this community about what it wants. So I really like that, and there's a whole lot of other things that I'd like to add, but I don't want to take up everybody's time.
Thank you for that. Hilary.
Can I ask to see, is the money time bound though? Because if we don't
Shall I, whatever useful for me, just to say a few things. And actually, I was just going to invite you, Jackie, to come up with me. Sorry, I am one of the Wellington City Councillors for the last decade, so I have walked some of this journey. The money has been, I was just thinking, it's been in the budget since 2009, I think.
2012.
No, it was 2012, I'm sorry. So, and it hasn't been attacked, and it's not going to be touched in this long-term budget unless, you know, someone, you know, from Cornwall starts to agitate. It should be safe. I think there is a long history, and Jackie and I have had discussions in other meetings of the community. You know, there were bigger plans in the past to do something quite dramatic with this this area. And if I, you know, could have everything in the world, I would have put out a cheque for $4 million. The Newlands Community Centre, that's what it cost back in 2008, so that's 10 years ago, would have cost a lot more now. If anyone's ever been up there, it's very lovely.
How much was council money?
Oh, I can't remember most of it though.
They raised some themselves.
Poor community though, it's not, you know, it's not.
They got $500,000 from the Johnsonville licence.
Yeah, so, but still council had to write a big cheque.
Sure.
So I guess the money was more about an upgrade rather than a complete redevelopment. Even before the construction market went completely crazy, we knew it wasn't a big amount of money, and we've allocated money for Newtown and Strathmore, you know, which have also got communities which have significant disadvantage. So I guess that is part of the parameter. The other thing, Karen, perhaps there is money out there, but it takes a lot of effort to raise that, you know, like say if you want to raise another $1 million, that's a heck of a lot of work. And of course there's competition from other community groups who are doing all really cool projects. The other thing too is, and I don't assume this, but there may be some people in this community that have issues with getting money from the pokies. There's a whole lot of ethical issues around that. So, which is where a lot of the money for community comes from. So, and just the other thing I was saying to Hilary, and Luke before the meeting, the construction market at the moment is utterly crazy. It is, now it might quieten down with people with more expertise. So that would be my only worry I'm happy to support more consultation if that's what people, if people want that, but that does run the risk of more cost escalations. I mean, it really is insane at the moment, and we are having it, which is why you see in our budget millions and millions of dollars. And I'd just like to finish though, and I should have said this first, I do want to acknowledge and thank all the people that have spent many months on this process, particularly the volunteers. It's been an absolute labour of love, and I think there's been a lot of really good process and a lot of good community consultation, and of course appreciate those who have been paid. We need professionals to do some of this work. Some of us just do not have the skills that are needed. Brian and I aren't going to get out of the habits and the drawing to do a design. That would not be a good idea. We just need to write the cheques. I think that's probably up. If there was a will for the community to raise more money to do something bigger and grander, it's just like when you're designing your own house or do a bit of a renovation, you can always put more, then that's a discussion. I don't think we're going to, Brian and I will really be able to go back and ask for more money from the council. I think that will be troublesome, because I also have, like on the infrastructure person, we've got flooding issues in Aro Street, and those are going to be fixed up. There's lots and lots of other priorities that need to be sorted out. But I'm sure I can speak for Brian that we will do whatever we can to support you in your process.
If we are thinking about this as a layered process, that it's not going to happen at once, are we right to prioritise the building and then look at the other stuff, the landscaping around that? Like if we are making decisions, is it the building we need to focus on first? What do you think? I think it's the building we need to focus on first, but I don't know if that's what everybody else thinks. Anybody else?
I would like to suggest that maybe the underwhelmingness of our response is because most of us here somehow know that yes, we've got an expanded building, which is extremely sensible. Yes, we've got some landscape, some of it that's in the dark, so okay. But in actual fact, I get the distinct impression, as much as the design might be whatever, somehow this isn't meeting our needs. There hasn't been anything achieved by expanding the building and a bit of landscape that somehow warrants 1.2 million, 800 grand, or even doing the work. I get the feeling that if everybody in this room was to say, look, this doesn't feel right, we might come up with what is missing and why we aren't all jumping up and down and saying, yay, we've got some money, we're going to get something done. We are a community that has always done its own thing. We've planted our own trees. We have dragged this building in from Newlands. We just do it. There is something wrong if this silence is an indication of the wild enthusiasm for your planning.
My silence is because I'm frustrated that we're not getting on with it. And I've been here 38 years. I've also had the experience of trying to hire hall accommodation for meetings and so on, and not being able to do so because the rooms just aren't available because there's only one room and it's booked, and stuff like that. And from that practical point of view, I think we've got a need that's established here, and that if we need to cut our cloth to suit our coat to suit the limited amount of cloth that we've been given, then we can at least tackle those issues.
So why was the moving the building side on the other way? Was that just purely budget? Is that why
the combination of moving the building and adding to it made the budget blow up.
Right.
But if you just moved it,
the building cost 55 grand.
Well, I'm not a QS, but we have to believe.
I think you get that QS report upon which the decision was made we can only afford to extend the hall.
We're working on that with the Issues Resolution Office at Wellington City Council.
information issue.
Excuse me?
They've changed their name to complaints and information issue.
Yeah, so they are working on that response, and we'll
Is
have
it
that.
commercially sensitive?
We'll have that shortly.
The answer as to whether we can see it or not.
Yeah, and potentially releasing what information we can under what they advise us to.
Sure.
Yeah.
I mean, at the very least, it would be interesting to see how much it would have cost to turn the building around and move it.
Yep. I think it was raised and in the public information so far that there are a lot of services, underground services, and that can be quite expensive. So that I think showed up in a lot of the options that come forward, and that's been in the public information, that underground services, whenever you start digging, it just becomes real costly.
This is just a detail, but in this proposed plan, how are we going to go about selling the Christmas trees? Where are they going to be stored? How are they going to be accessed and so on?
We've a couple of options. One is to use the pavilion structure to be able to enclose and lock them away, or part of it, depending on how much space you need. Another option is to have a designated spot where you can put shipping containers, so that the pavilion is suited to that, so you can have a temporary storage.
But cars won't be able to get anywhere near them, will they?
Yeah, we're increasing the size of the access from the street.
From Palm Street. Not for driving in though, not so you would take your tree to the street, not the car to the tree, just to clarify.
Sorry, I'm a little confused. Will cars still be able to drive all the way onto the basketball court?
Not to pick up Christmas trees, no.
I think only to jump in here from an AVCC side. Effectively, the designs, well, as far as we're aware, don't change the physical possibilities of vehicle access. Vehicle access will be a matter of how AVCC chooses to manage the site, just as it is now.
We still anticipate cars being able to drive on, but it'll be a controlled activity.
Maybe access to management question.
Hey, I'm not a pro or con, I've lost the plot on that. Excuse me. Look, some feedback, you've made it hard for me to give you feedback. You have presented the plan with numbers which I've gone, oh yeah, I love 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And then you presented a slideshow that didn't match the numbers. And so I'm finding it really hard when talking about budget and picking bits. I can't give you my feedback on the bits because I don't know how to. So if the slides had matched the numbers and the numbers had matched the slides, then I was to say to you, give how much for 1, 2, 3 and 4, or 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, I might be able to pick and choose, but I don't know how it all ties together, because one of the plans doesn't match what you gave me in the presentation. The presentation we talked about deck around pool, urban ecology, plants, compost seat, basketball court, it doesn't quite apply to this plan. So,
you've got 2 documentation sets there, one from us and one from the architects. They're not meant to necessarily be read together. Our ones are the ones where you've got a perspective view. So that they're the ones with the urban ecology and the cycle tracks and basketball.
Those numbers on the plan from us relate to the notes below.
Yes, I see that, but for me there's a mismatch on what we're actually trying to
that's simply a process issue, and that we develop those and then the landscape follow. So I'm sorry if it's confusing.
Yeah, just some feedback.
I don't see a lot of note taking. I just wonder, how genuine is this process about seeking feedback from people about all the items that are involved?
They're recording the meeting.
We are filming it.
You can later record it. Which is fantastic.
And then who makes the decisions about that? When's this community going to make its decisions? Tonight.
This is what this meeting is all about.
This is going to decide tonight.
Is that anything you we do have something we wanted to help make a decision. I'm going to say something, I'm independent here, I'm not a designer and I'm not on the governance, but I've been involved with communities about design for a long time. And I'm wondering if there is a confusion about how designing happens, because it's not about a tick list of options, it's not about a shopping list, it's about a kind of funneling and honing of ideas. And that's why we keep coming back to you with little different decisions and different layers of decisions. So
it seems like you took a big leap from the time we put dots on images to this. I feel like there's a few steps and discussions missing between that, the last time I participated in something, and this. Like, where did this come from?
Do you want to speak to that process with the...
But it wasn't 80% of previous respondents and submissions saying is that the number one issue about this place, the thing that we valued most was a place for children. Not once, other than a mention of the preschool, have I heard anything about children. I haven't heard the designers or the landscapers mention.
I disagree entirely.
I wasn't a part of the workshops prior to this, so forgive me if I'm speaking out of turn, but I feel like what seems to be the problem is maybe a lack of briefing. You know, like is there a really solid brief that we are working on to develop? You know, because I think we need a priorities list, and we do.
So where's that written?
There's a lot of
This is
confusion.
in the report from the pre-engagement, and then it was developed through the inquiry by design, and then it was interpreted into space in the concept designs and tested through 64. You've got 64 interviews.
I've read all these documents and I never, what's the document that we sent to the architect, the architectural brief? Can that be made available to us?
I feel like I was...
We've had that discussion before.
Traditional design works where you provide a brief, a specification, and a
That's
design-based building.
Yeah.
Participatory design works where you go back again and again and you hone as a community. And that's what we're doing here. Is that otherwise these guys can go off from that brief and put their own culture and values on it, and you never get to kind of tinker that in, as it were. I hope I'm being helpful in my prior experience, but I feel like I'm doing a different thing tonight than I expected. I'm going to go that and then I'm going to go that.
Can I tell you some things I really like?
Yes.
That
we're all getting tired, so
that's really low, but I really like the idea of a better functioning, more usable kitchen for our community, because God knows those of us who have cooked in there, it's not efficient enough. So I like the idea of a much more open, much more accessible kitchen so that lots of people can actually be working in there. I like the idea of having smaller rooms because, you know, I have been to meetings where, you know, there's been something happening and there's been a conflict in space, and it is, we do need that. I like the idea of being able to have a much bigger hall. Maybe it's only for the election meetings that we know of at the moment, but if we build the space, we can probably have more things. We can create some options. I really like the idea of tying the outside to the inside of the hall, because at the moment it's really awful. You know, so those are some things that I really like about the plan that's been delivered.
Okay, thank you. Anything else? Go.
That's precisely what I wanted to say. You've got a bunch of people in here who know exactly how this place works. I think it's about time we actually say, you know, give you the information you need, what works, what doesn't work about the plan.
Okay.
Who's next?
What works, what doesn't work about the plan? Let's have a bit more of that.
Another very practical doesn't work is that it has both the meeting rooms basically contiguous with the hall or not separated. And if you've got a loud music-based thing in here, you can't have a committee meeting in either of that concertina separated room or effectively this room here.
Technically, I would disagree with that assessment.
Well, you can go about later. Who else?
Excuse me, to answer that question, that observation, I think we can overcome that. I think we can provide you with rooms that are sufficiently acoustically separated to be able to do something relatively noisy here and something relatively quiet.
I really like how the landscape artist thought about the use of the compost bins and how that the pattern is used with people dropping compost off, but people willing to bring compost out. And I like how they've integrated the composting system and potentially one gardening system with actual vegetable gardens. I think that's great.
Okay, thank you. Where am I going next?
I personally think the pool needs to be moved sidewalks over the match point that was gone, because it was always one building on point.
Sorry, could you speak up?
We need to move the wall, so that the actually is gone, there's actually sight lines between all the areas, almost the walls. That was always a major focus of another one point that everyone always made about the site development. And I can't think of anyone who either disagrees with that point.
Takes all the money away.
Yeah.
I feel like it takes all the money away.
Yeah, and I was
There's other ways that we're dealing with the pinch points that are talked about, which can slow the traffic down, which is what we talk, without having to spend money to move the forward. So
we can potentially get more money, but anyway, the other thing is
that's potentially, but that is a huge undertaking and it's not guaranteed, and who is going to
But has anybody actually bothered to explore that?
Yeah, I'm not
And
saying
we
go
discussed that point.
I'm not
I don't
saying
think it has really been discussed tonight.
and the external courtyard, I just think that's just the same pretty much as what we've got now, which is not sort of surveyed area that where needles and syringes can be left and that sort of stuff that no one kind of walks around and yeah, that's.
So can I just throw another out there idea? Like there's been a lot of talk tonight about the pinch point. What about cutting into the corner of that road and making some sort of cool feature out of it and widening that space?
That's so obvious, I don't know why anybody hasn't actually mentioned it before, but I'll say that.
People have mentioned that time and time again.
Yeah.
But you could actually make it bigger and make something cool with the shape of that road.
Can I suggest that it's appropriate that the designers who considered that move and then explained why they didn't think it was a good idea, give their reasoning?
Happy to. Yeah.
It's fairly well established, obviously. Yeah.
There's actually a dimension across there. I can't remember what it is, but it's something over 4 metres through that gap. And while we recognise, sorry, 5.4 metres. It's actually wide enough. This whole thing about the pinch point is not about the gap. It's about the speed of the bikes versus the speed of pedestrians.
Sorry, I have to absolutely disagree. One of the main uses of this park is an access way for everybody who walks through here to town. And on the weekend you walk through 3 or 4 times. When you're biking or walking, there is no clear sight line. The park itself doesn't feel in any way connected to this separate site, which is the community centre site. That is the big hiccup in actually getting yourself through the park to feel like you're still walking through a park to the other side of the park. It doesn't work like that at all. I'm not going to go any slower on my bike, I'm not going to walk any slower, but I know that when I get there I have to stop to see. You can't see. Even a simple thing like curving the fence line of the preschool would absolutely have helped. But in actual fact, when it comes to us spilling out into the community, we don't. We spill out into there. We don't, this hall isn't facing the community that it is serving and wants to be part of. So even if you were to take that end of the building off and put it on that end, so that when you're over on Aro Street, you know that you're going to end up in Palmer Street. It's that whole visual movement which hasn't in any way been addressed by these plans. Sorry to be
No,
but this is how we.
I accept that.
And to be honest, if I'd had time, I would have sat there and counted the number of people who do in fact come through in a day. But on a Sunday, when the church put their silly flag up there and they park their cars, we all go through and say, excuse me, the whole community at some point, whether it's 3 in the morning or 3 in the afternoon, moves through this park. That's why the pinch point is an issue.
I just wanted to, what I was actually referring to before was that the reasoning that I've heard that cutting off the corner of the building would not be, and thus improving the sight lines, is that by improving the sight lines and the curve that cyclists can take, you'll actually speed up the speed that cyclists will go, which is a safety issue for preschool children. That's the reasoning that I've heard, and that's the reasoning that I'm reasonably familiar with.
The children getting hit is just like it. Because
there's lots of near misses.
Yeah, lots of near misses.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's the issue. Because I walk here 5-6 times a day, and I've never had problems. I walk, I don't bike, but I've never had an issue coming from Aro Road to Cuba Street through that area there. So
we did hear it consistently from the preschool and from families that use the park.
There's no reason why you can't increase the sight line and slow down bike traffic using different methods. That's just pretty obvious.
Yeah, I was just saying that improving the sight line. I was just demonstrating the point that improving the sight line isn't improving
A question to you. If you did improve the sight lines by chamfering off the edge of the building down here, would that be of greater benefit to you than retaining a second decent sized meeting room? I mean, that's the compromise.
It's not a black and white decision.
Yes.
Well, don't make the courtyard, build into the courtyard area.
I do think we have got some time on our hands in terms of, we're talking a little bit in terms of the landscape, the texture and things could improve it. These are things you could actually trial as well. So we could do something out there now as a group that actually began to make a difference. And if it doesn't work, then we know it doesn't work and we can move on and we can find the other solution. But we can do this. Wellington Waterfront put some timbers down, some little bits of MDF down, and tested out whether or not that made a difference. And it did. So there's things you can do.
4.2 metres, right? 4.2 metres. That's more, why? That's more than the distance that there is on Orange and Parade for both bikes and walking.
And crocodile.
Right? So why can't we have walking and bikes in that area separated by a walkway, a paintway or something like that, so that you've got 2 distinct areas for walking and biking?
Yeah, there's lots of ways that you can simply test those things out as well.
Okay.
Having also, like Anna, missed out on the consultations, the workshops, I want to know if there's been any data-driven research done about the pinch point. Have we done a count of the number of users, then classify them by pedestrians and cyclists? Have we got data about the actual situation?
We did qualitative interviews, and the pinch point was pointed out at each interview as something to comment on at the concept phase. And we did a series of other qualitative research, if you want to frame it as that, during the Festival of Place to gain feedback on that. So I would say that from a qualitative point of view, it was fairly well covered, and perception of safety is obviously very important. So,
I would like to say that I deal in my work with transport engineers and people who study the way flows happen, both pedestrian and cycles and cars and trucks and buses and everything. And I also went into a very long talk by Jan Gale, the Danish transport specialist. And one thing about pinch points that's good is that people know that it's a place where you slow down and have a look. And if you leave it shared, you still all have to slow down. Look, we can't protect everybody. We can't we can't say only little children can go in here and they have priority. It is a shared space. And maybe what we need is someone who really understands the psychology of that to come and talk to us and explain it a bit, because otherwise we're going to end up with the thing we asked for, and it might not turn out to be the solution that we really wanted.
Just to say, I totally agree with that, and I've done lots of work like looking into that sort of stuff as well, so I do understand that. But the driver is because the preschool playground is not the preschool playground, it is Aro's public playground. Preschool get used to it during preschool hours. It is our Aro Street public playground. And it needs to be integrated with the park. That's partly why cars were cut off, one of the major reasons cars were cut off from Aro using it, because children did almost just get run over outside there. And it was tried because so we could, as parents in the park, if you had a group in a picnic or whatever with your children, someone always had to be over there at the preschool, and you couldn't actually sit and watch your kids, they couldn't come and go by themselves. And it's still a similar situation now with the bikes, and I believe, and also the formal sight lines, walking down late at night, that sort of thing, I think that can be improved. And you can do things with landscaping to slow bikes down and to make it look like it is slower and that sort of stuff, but still maintain sight lines and make the area. And I think limiting ourselves to a budget, we maybe need to investigate more funding before we do this. That's just
okay. Is there anything additional?
I'm not a local, but I really like warm, comfortable rooms, and this place, like we did an upgrade, but those curtains and all the glass and not enough insulation. So just that we don't do that stuff last, which is what we tend to do in New Zealand. We actually put that right up first. Good. Oh.
Okay. And could we trial the acoustic? Yes, for the bikes. I mean, surely that's not a very expensive thing to trial. And we have all sorts of problems with bikes. They ride on the bicycle, they ride on the grass to get around people who are walking, and then we've just got mud for half the year. All sorts of things. So if we can
bit of
make
temporary
it
activation
a little bit unfriendly to bicycles and see if they choose another route or not, before we go a lot further
unfriendly
down.
but not challenging in a fun way.
Not challenging.
I was going to say.
Big ramps, you have to jump.
I can think of some guys who
Well, that's what I get passed by every day as I walk through, is the mountain bikers, and they love to jump the curb.
Yeah. Anything else? Martin?
Anything else?
I love that.
We've become very general. I would also like to thank Luke and Hilary for the hundreds of hours of volunteer work they did, and I think we should express our gratitude. It is an exceptional contribution to our community that they have selflessly made. Wonderful, thank you for that. I think we seem to be talking at several levels, and so I will go for the one that I see. If we're going to be doing a playground revamp, and we're going to be doing a garages revamp, and we never set any goals for what we wanted out of this project, we just sort of said, here's some money, what can we do with it? And it doesn't seem to have solved the thoroughfares issue. Cycle lanes, for instance, are quite a popular thing. This is a great way for a cyclist to get to the city, but it seems we're going to continue to share the pedestrian way. There are long vehicle thoroughfares from Aro Street to get to here, so it's a very inefficient use of space, and you wouldn't teach your kid to ride your bike on the driveway thoroughfare, it just doesn't feel right. So of our total area, very little of it seems to be useful recreation area, because a lot of it is consumed as vehicle thoroughfares. Looking at the range of things, I'm not sure that we're ready to go for one option to extend our old hall that we've waited 42 years to replace. It seems there are a lot of other conversations, including whether we want to be more ambitious about what we build. And I do appreciate that raising funds is an onerous task. It's lengthy and there is no guarantee we will succeed. But I would point out that each of Newlands, Johnsonville, Kandala and Karori the last one being an event centre, not a community centre, there was substantial contributions made by the community so they could build what they wanted rather than what the council budget allowed them to do. And they took on quite a big mission, but they will succeed in their mission.
Okay, thank you. Any more additional points, and then we're going to move on to something where you can express how supportive you are to move forward.
Just a really small one. Could we have the accordion doors to allow the hall to open into the fauna room, just to get a really big space?
Okay.
I feel in many ways we're getting, I like a lot of what was brought forward and what we do already. But I wonder if we could not incorporate a few things in particular, like more of a support for some homeless people, like in the way of being a bit of more of a drop-in centre, maybe showers, maybe some support for that. And in the terms of the park and the children, a lot of the area is not that useful in the winter. And if there's some more sort of semi-dry protected areas with things like maybe barbecue machines, something safe for families in semi-sheltered areas, be able to, like have a meal, that sort of thing.
Thank you.
Things like maybe facility for music, after school programs, things like that need more of a dedicated sort of space in there. And we used to have the community worker based here. There could be a range of those small service things, maybe really.
I think about motion.
But also, I think there's a lot of good in this whole thing, and we've got to try and keep it momentum up. I just don't want us to get tracked on just doing better what we do now. And trying to think about who we serve.
Thank you.
One very small thing, our community workers always froze to death when that was their office. That little office that's down the back there, I think they might just freeze to death there as well and not have any access to seeing who is out there in the community.
And make sure staff are warm. Okay.
And that was the surveillance point. The surveillance about being able to see the community.
See what?
In here or outside?
Security of what's by whom?
The staff being able to see outdoors.
So being able to access the community. Yeah, both things.
More the other way around, somebody knowing that there is somebody in an office here.
Okay, thank you.
I would really like to see and be incorporated in it some way of putting a weatherproof membrane over the top of the basketball court to make it into a 400 or 500 capacity or weather venue, right? And stop referring to it as a basketball court, but it's a great big open space. And it seems to me it would be eminently sensible to do that. Under where the garages are, where you put all the storages, above the garages you put in some apartments, small bedroom apartments, that you retain the choke point here in the corner, and you increase it even more by putting French doors off the meeting room. That the bunker should be saved, and the hall lifted up and put back on top of the bunker. That there should be a place for the honey pit. There should be a outside fire circle. that we should get rid of the driveway in from Aro Street, we should get rid of the fence on the edge of Aro Park, because what point does it serve? And I've got hundreds of other ideas like that I have suggested. And I don't see them come through. Don't see any of that come through or any rebuttal of why that's not a good idea. And most of those ideas have found resonance with people.
Thank you, Russell.
Do I keep going?
No. No. Okay. Do you want to move on? Or do you have anything else that you want to add?
Sorry, can you just give me explain the move on? Because if I'm can you explain the move on?
So the next session you're going to express your degree of support for moving forward in the direction of these designs are going. So we're moving on from giving feedback to drawing a line in the sand from 1 to 10 of how much support you give.
And that's including what's been said tonight.
Yeah.
As part of
yeah. So we're moving from general feedback to specific lines in sand. That's the next task. Can I explain what it is?
Can I just also suggest, it is 10 o'clock and I've never been part of a consensus building, we just go until 3 o'clock in the morning.
Well, the next two exercises take 10 minutes each, so that's
Okay.
what I'm trying to move to.
Okay, so if people are okay with that, but I think, and if there are children still out there, I hope they're not.
No, they're not.
No, they're
They're
not.
not.
They've got
Okay, move on. Yep. Okay, so the next exercise, what we're going to do, and I've lost my slides, so I'm going to have to speak to it. You make sure everyone's got paper and pens. That's all right, it'll take too much time. What I'm going to ask you to do, where can I write? I need something to just illustrate this. Can I get a piece of that flip chart paper? Yeah, it doesn't matter. So, I'm going to ask you on your piece of paper to write a number from 1 to 10. 1 is, I do not think these designs improve Aro Valley. 10 is, I absolutely believe these designs improve Aro Valley. 5 is, I don't think it really makes a difference. So that's your scale. You can use any number from 1 to 10, not just 1, 5 and 10. And I'd like...
Define 1 and 5 as being the same?
No. So 1 is, takes us downhill. It's not good for Aro Valley. I might not be making sense because I'm getting tired because I got up at 5 o'clock this morning. 10 is, this is a great plan. It's going to move Aro Valley in a good direction. 5 is, it's not really going to make a difference. So 5 is status, it's status quo. It doesn't make any difference if we do all this work. 1 is negative, 10 is positive.
Sorry, that question, is that related only to the design and the ideas that's going to happen, or in relation to the cost of this project? Because it seems to me 5 could be, it's not going to make a difference, except when we consider the cost going into the project.
So we haven't costed the plan yet, so you're talking to the designs.
Irrespective of cost.
Well, that's the next stage, and that's back to that point about design moving on. We move forward in stages. You can't make a decision about that yet because we haven't costed it. So what you're making your line in the sand about is whether you support us moving or support the design team to move forward in developing the design, taking account of your feedback. And if they do that, is it a good idea? Is it a bad idea? Or does it make no difference to Aro Valley? Is
it possible that we could be worse off? Is it really possible for someone to vote less than 5?
Yes. Oh my God, do you want me to tell you about designs that make places worse?
Really? Okay, sorry.
Whilst you're voting, shall I tell you my favourite story about a design that made a community worse? It was in Glasgow, and they built a high-rise block in a Catholic community with a lift. And the lift wasn't big enough to get coffins, and in the community, they took the coffins into the family home for 2 or 3 days for the wake. It was intrinsically important. That design feature would have got us less than 5.
Wow.
There you go, there's one example from another place and another time.
Is it one score for the whole thing? I don't need to choose between the bits I'm scoring the whole.
No, because that was what the qualitative feedback, that's what all this feedback's about, is you giving us your ideas, your feedback on views. What we're doing now is an overall sense, and both of these fit together. You don't take a vote without understanding what's behind it. So both of those pieces of information will inform the next step. Does that make sense? It's like an intelligent vote rather than a kind of blind vote. Claire, can I just, practical issues, can I just check that everybody's got a piece of paper and pen? If you haven't, if you just like still put your hand up and Claire will go to it. And then
Is the vote assuming that what they're all always saying is being addressed?
Votes, now they vote.
Excuse me! Loud voice in progress.
Real asset in a local council there. Claire is going to just come around and collect those votes, as it were, those numbers, that degree of support from you now. I'm going to, while she does that, I'm going to move on to the next thing, which is...
Can you tell us what will happen to that information?
I can tell you now, or I can tell you a bit about it.
Not what the information is, but what will happen to the data you just collected.
What will I do with it, as it were?
Yes.
So it will be sorted out and put on a scale, and then we normally just make a visual where you can see you've got 4 there, 5 there.
Is that going to be done tonight?
That's right now, isn't it? We do that.
Oh, you've not begun. We're going to try and do it tonight, but I'm really aware that there's some people that are desperate to get out of the room.
So then if the
if
answers
you
will be
stay,
published.
Claire is going to do that task, and Claire is here because she's completely independent. So Claire is trying to collect them in to sort them out, and we can lay them out. But I'm trying to get this to the end, so those who need to leave can leave. Last task. I want to... You have a governance group who's steering this project. As the designs become more detailed, as they get honed over time in whatever direction that goes in, we're interested in knowing, and I kind of do need my presentation for this, but I'll try without it. Have you got the... There it is. I'm interested in how we form a community voice of designing alongside the governance process. So I'd like you, if you can think of names of people who have a deep understanding or live the values of Arroness and love finding solutions with people who have different interests. That's me trying to explain what a voice of design is. If you know people that have that community voice of design, who like doing that, so people who, we're not talking about the focus group of the people who are geeky about AV equipment or about, you know, transport solutions or whatever it is. We're talking about that kind of almost kaitiaki, I don't want to misuse that word, but that kind of guardianship of design. But people who actually think like designers. They like to kind of knit things together and find solutions, but they also hold Arroness. And you trust those people to represent you in that process. Would you write them on a piece of paper and just put the names in there? Now, when I've done this before, it's really interesting that the same names always come up again and again. But I would be interested in you just telling us who those people are, so that when we need them, we know who you would trust. Okay? So that's the last thing tonight. Claire, I think, is doing the fastest sort in history. It's a bit like a polling booth over there. It can be a few names, yeah. Yeah, if you've really got more than one you would trust, you could write more than one. And it's about that general interest of Aro, so it's not about representing particular positions, it's about the values. So, we'll just wait for Claire to do this sort out. We sometimes do this publicly and get people to mark up. It doesn't feel like the right thing to do, which is why we're doing this sort. We will do this. Yeah. I'm just going to mark up how many blue bullets there are. You've got 3 guys.
I see they got me, look. Yeah.
Pretty cool.
Little things that
Brian, will you do your thing?
Everybody, thank you.
This is so interesting. Okay, so we've added the votes up on the scale of 1 to 10. And you've got 16 that think on that scale from 6 to 10. And that's 5 numbers. I've done that wrong, haven't I? Oh, sorry, go back to your talk.
Well, it's and that's consistent with that's consistent with what you said in terms of scoring. It just so happens that there are 4 between 5 and 10 and 3 between 1 and 5.
So I'm all right. I'm losing the will slightly. So you've got 3. We just don't think it's going to make any difference. Doing this, not doing this. The designs tonight, taking account of your feedback, it's just not going to make any difference. You've got 16 votes that think that it will improve it. And we'll have a closer look at the degree of improvement, if that makes sense, but I'm not doing that live at 10:15. And then we've got 15 votes that pull this way, down to the designs, plus what you've heard tonight that you want to take an account of, it will be negative for Aro Valley. Okay?
So you don't have a mandate to proceed?
So,
don't we need one?
I'm assuming I'm now handing over to Luke and Hilary to say what happens next. Hospital first. Which is that they're going to consider the feedback from tonight at the steering group, I assume.
Well, we'll have to inevitably, that's the next step regardless of what the outcome is, that it needs to be discussed at the next steering group meeting. But like, to be honest, I've no idea, I mean, as a representative of someone on the steering group, I've no idea what this means in terms of a mandate or a lack of mandate. What this seems is an even spectrum of opinion.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's the one scenario we didn't discuss, isn't it?
That people think we'll be worse off.
What's that?
That half the people in this room think we'll be worse off than even balance. That's a disastrous outcome.
That's a mandate not to proceed until we find out why.
It's an even spread across the scale.
Exactly, yeah. People one way or the other.
It makes a difference. That's not a very positive outcome. So I think those 3 really shifted the negative, really. I mean, if you don't think that's going to make a difference.
Oh, at 1.2 million to spend, you should put about 7 as being the halfway point. If you're below 7, there's something that can go for money.
I don't even think about money.
Oops. Retract.
Okay.
Well, I presume everyone put their numbers there, knowing that it's going to be done to the budget. But, yeah.
It wasn't.
Did you assume that it'll... I think like,
I think
and
that
as the representative of AVCC in particular, we'll have to discuss and actually come back to the community about what this actually means, and I mean, because I think there are probably some key things that are. I would have to assume there are some key things that are influencing people's confidence in it. And I assume it's about, the way forward is about how those particular things are addressed.
Okay.
I think that one important point that was kind of brought up by a few people, but more directly by Russell, was how many people really do think there needs to be more community consultation on this design.
And I think our observation so far is that there's a kind of pretty even spread of people who think that there should be more and people that think that there's already been too much.
Why don't we take a vote on that? Why don't we find out for real?
I don't think we've got the whole community in the room.
I feel like tonight's the first chance we've actually had to talk about it.
I'd like to say that consultation, against a design or whatever, is a bit different from a debate within the community. This is the first conversation, right?
Yeah. It's been declined at general meetings as a discussion topic for the agenda. We had one general meeting that was a presentation of the plan. It wasn't a discussion of ideas. I don't feel like participated in it.
Well, okay, so you're, I'm just commenting that there've been, so we're aware that there are people who think that there's been not enough discussion and consultation, and others who think that there's been plenty
I'd also like to see a little bit more engagement for the wider community rather than the people that generally come to this meeting, which seems to be pretty continuous.
Did you come to the earlier workshops?
I actually didn't hear about it. Okay, and that's what I mean. I want more engagement with the community. I'd like to see some signs up in the park rather than just the people who are on the email list.
I think I've got to jump in there and say that there was really big publicity and about these.
Maybe, but I don't think it really actually made much impact on the community. I don't think it actually drew people in. I don't think a lot of people really saw that. I definitely didn't. I came through here pretty much 5-6 times a day. I didn't really see anything.
Can I just ask the people who, said this is going to negatively impact, what is it that you actually want to happen from this point on? What can you expect?
An open, inclusive, participatory process where all voices are heard and realistic options are investigated.
So more consultation.
As I said before, I feel this is the first. I feel this is the first time that as a member that we've discussed it as members at a general meeting.
Yeah.
There have been consultations, but there haven't been opportunities to discuss things that are on the table.
Right.
I was just going to say, have we got a feel for the things that could be changed that were genuinely not supported, that could be adjusted and then that's brought back to another meeting?
Well, I think that's what this was trying to do, because all of this is giving all that feedback on all those things, and so the next step would be if the community was saying, okay, given everything that we've fed back on, we accept that you'll look at all of that and come back with another set of ideas that we can then discuss even further. That's what you were voting on, whether that we should take that next step or not. What that next step would be, we don't really know, but it would somehow incorporate what's been said this evening and be back presented to the community.
Yep.
So,
but we're not starting from scratch.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, some people are saying we should go back to scratch, aren't they? And that's the tricky part, because who really wants to go back to scratch? Martin?
No, sorry, I put up my hand to speak. I think it was not really I think the consultations we did to find our values were very well run, and it was quite interesting. I think it was enormously expensive and inappropriate when we hadn't decided, you know. I mean, if we'd known that we could only afford to extend the hall, we could have saved that first 50 grand and all the other stuff beside.
But we've got a huge amount of feedback. We've got so much information that we've gathered over this time from so many people in so many different ways that have fed into this design. That's what's been reflected back. It's not just a set of ideas that these guys have come up with from nowhere. It's totally based on what the community has said so far. So
Sounds like we just need to discuss it more.
Right. I consulted...
Yeah, well, potentially, but in what way and how, you know?
Can I add something just from my background, is that different people will experience different things as feeling like they have participated. So some people would come to a meeting like this and feel like it shut them down, they were really uncomfortable, it was not participation, and they go away saying, I haven't participated in this process. Some people will attend an interview and feel really heard something. So we've had a whole lot of different processes in order to give different people different senses of participation. What we want to know now is what happens next.
Can I suggest, is it worthwhile, mate, and I suggest Sunday afternoon or Saturday afternoon at 2 o'clock, better time, just to try and isolate the parts where there's really, really, really big disagreement, and then parts, because people have managed to say some things that they like, okay, and then that might get to a better place where you can go in terms of the process.
That could be the next step.
So if we take those community voices of design to work now on that design, listening to your feedback and to what you said about the degree of support you've got, does that feel comfortable?
Might just need another step before you start putting it into some.
Yeah.
I think you really need to nail down exactly. Now we've had some of that discussion tonight, but I think it needs to be quite a precise list. And see if then you get your experts in to see if you can fix some of those things. Now, look, you know, the orientation of the building, Karen, probably what you do need is a number, like how much that might cost, because I think that really can fix it.
Yeah, I'd like to jump in and talk to a couple of things on that in a second, but yeah. Oh, well maybe now, sorry.
Yeah, why don't you finish
if you finished. I think something that's worth this one sort of say a piece to somebody who's witnessed the development of the design is that the echoing what Hilary said, it has been based on the extensive consultation that's occurred. I know that not everyone has been sitting there watching those, watching everything crystallise from that. You know, this is the first time it's been brought back, because it's the first time that there's been something in a presentable format that's taken into account all the necessary things that need to be taken account of, so it's not meaningless. So there is a degree of resolution in it. So as somebody watching that progress, all of it's been based on all of that consultation that's occurred. When we talk about the restrictions on the restrictions to do with the budget that have excluded certain major decisions and options, there hasn't been, I don't know what anyone else thinks, but there hasn't been anything there that's been excluded that feels like, it doesn't feel like any of the exclusion of those options is a major compromise on any of the key things that have been that have come from the consultation process. I know there are specific things. I know that people are, you know, attached to the idea of creating a totally different kind of set of spaces around the building in some cases. But largely, I just encourage people to think, to ask themselves the question: is the reorientation of the building, is building a new building actually going? What particular issue is that going to solve that the current design doesn't? I think it's really worth thinking about that, because I know, yes, of course, it would be nice to have a new building, it would be nice to have 3 times the budget, etc. But what would that achieve in terms of solving the issues that people have identified?
Maybe that's
so
something
far?
we're meeting about, so those of us who can try to explain. I mean, how do we get her, if you want to hear that,
Yep.
that's our next meeting.
It seems to me, listening to all this, that there's quite a dichotomy between what I've written down as somebody said earlier, a discussion about what the community wants versus a review of a design. So what this team has done has responded to what you have told us, but what I'm hearing is that there's a significant proportion who actually have some fundamental issues about whether what you have told us is the right stuff.
Yeah.
Is that where it sits?
Yes. Yeah.
And I wonder whether, this is a wondering conversation, I'm wondering whether that is a conversation that is best held within the community without the consultants.
Agreed.
And then it's getting the people in the room to express all those things at the right, at the time and place that everyone can be.
In a way that helps.
Yes, exactly, that's constructive.
Because nobody's helped by people standing on the side and throwing rocks.
No.
But people need to be helped by being positive and being helpful and being contributory.
Yeah.
So I'm just putting that out there because I'm sitting outside here thinking, there's some, quite disparate opinions, and some people want to move on and some people want to re-examine some of the fundamental assumptions. And if you want to re-examine some of the fundamental assumptions, that calls into question the direction we are going now.
Yeah, I think the initial stuff about finding our values was a good team building exercise and identified a range of interests. And then, John, thank you for the work you did designing to brief and budget. There's no blame on you for the numbers up on that board up there. You produced a design according to instruction. Between those two things, I think, was the period where we, as a community, could have perhaps identified whether this was our 42-year big bill or not, whether it was going to achieve any particular identified goals or not. And that was the opportunity for some guidance with creativity. We're a small community, we don't necessarily have all the design and other building skills within us. So in that big space there where we worked on what we wanted, I think it would have been great to have had, in the past there's been a design competition, to look at the 3 previous attempts to design for the site and have them up on the wall so we could be informed by them. To have some imaginative and creative people come and drop some ideas on us and show us a few things. And that would include the option of staying within budget or choosing to seek extra funding, and first of all going for what we like and then whether we want to try and raise the funds for it. And I don't feel that any of those things have been done with us. I'm not sure who's made the decisions. It hasn't been in groups like this. I tried to engage at the fair, the consultation for the design that was presented there, but the presenters were only allowed to speak about the proposal in front of them. They weren't allowed to speak about any other options. So I feel like it was narrowed down quite some time ago by a group that I had no perception of, but were making decisions on my behalf. But some of those, for instance, the idea of raising extra money, had been excluded without anyone's knowledge, or possibly not even consciously excluded.
Can I just comment on what John said? Because there is a degree to which I disagree. I haven't heard anything tonight that I haven't heard already in terms of feedback, or very, very little. So I know that this has informed the development of designs, and my understanding is that other things have come into play around technical constraints and other design decisions that have affected how those have been interpreted. So I don't think it's quite as black and white as that, John, I'll say, because this doesn't feel like particularly new information to me. Nuanced, a bit different, always is every time you hear it, but it doesn't feel. I'm not hearing it.
No, I'm not saying I've heard anything particularly different. I'm hearing the same level of disagreement.
From day one.
Can I just test a suggestion? I do wonder whether we've gone pretty much as far as we can go tonight. And I wonder if we could ask the steering group to take everything they've heard and everything that's been written up and away and have a really good conversation about it, and then let's get back together again. And I kind of would add my vote to Owen's for a Sunday afternoon or something rather than but you know, by that stage hopefully a bit more has been digested and you guys might be able to give us some suggestions about which way we go moving forward. But I'm hearing the same things being said over and over again now, and I think we've got to that point of the night where we're just going to start repeating ourselves. I think we're going to repeat ourselves. Okay. Well, just,
yeah, I think echoing what I said earlier and what Brian's proposed, I think this is a good time to call this meeting to an end. I'd really like to thank everybody for coming along and dedicating, you know, your time on this late evening. We will endeavour to get back to the community as soon as possible with a proposal to have a further discussion that will help shape how we're actually going to proceed with this project, and see how we can get a better sense of kind of buy-in and consensus than what these numbers are telling us, and really try and tease out what those issues are. And maybe one thought that I'd like to leave with people is it an issue that you've had with the process so far, or just, you know, I think we need to focus on whether it's an issue with the actual results that we've got on paper, and you know, and focus the discussion around that. With that, I'll draw this meeting to a close. Yeah.
What will happen in the meantime, in the sense of the maintenance issues and dealing with the expand consultation area? What's going to happen about fixing the rotten windows, or the drainage, or the tennis court fence which is falling over on the community centre office? What are we going to do about those things? That will just go on as normal and won't be detracted from this budget and the demolition of the whole thing?
At the moment, we're not talking about like this. We'll get back to the community soon. Like, I don't necessarily think that this is going to, at this stage, it's not clear that this is going to significantly extend the program.
So what's the target for construction date?
Well, it was supposed to be, what?
June next
begin.
Was it February or January? January, February?
Yeah.
And so if we extend things, that will push it out to March.
Well, it depends. It depends how far we extend things.
Well, like you've got to give a fortnight's notice of meetings. There's going to be time to do the analysis, so it's going to at least be another month before you come back to us.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I think, so in terms of it, if it's a month, I don't think it's really going to alter that picture of the maintenance cycle of the building. But I mean,
it doesn't really make any difference to all those things that you're talking about.
Yeah. I don't want to speak to Wellington City Council in terms of what they've got planned, but it's
I'm really aware there's people who would love to go to bed now. So if there's anything else you want to catch up with Luke and Hilary about, maybe we can do that one-to-one.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you.